With the release of Toy Story 5, there are now 31 Pixar movies, and it's time to rank them. Now, when I sat down to make this list and started looking around at some other people's lists, I started to realize that my own is very different from most other people's, and I have a lot of what I guess would be considered hot takes. So, with that being said, let's hop straight in. In last place, I have Brave. This is a movie that I've only watched a couple times over the decade and a half that it's been out, and that's because it's just a dull movie. Sure, the animation looks great and some of the landscapes are nice to look at, but the first hour is an absolute drag, and I feel like the movie's themes of teenage independence and mothers and daughters understanding each other, it's a very played out concept that has been done much better in the past. At number 30 is Turning Red. I think this is the definition of a movie that I can have a certain level of respect for, but it's just not for me. I think the quirky characters with these bombastic personalities can be entertaining for some people, but they just left me exhausted and annoyed by the end of the movie. Pair that with a story that I just never connected with, and yet another relatively dull mother and daughter understanding each other's storyline, and I just was never able to get into this one. Next up is The Good Dinosaur, which I can certainly respect for its visuals, and I think its story is probably a bit more cohesive and engaging than the prior two films on this list. But that being said, there is not one memorable thing in this movie, aside from the just brutal way they decided to kill that dad character. I mean, that was as clear as Pixar has ever portrayed the idea of death, but anyways, aside from that, this movie is an absolute nothing burger. 28, I have Lightyear. I respect the idea of showing us the movie that got Andy interested in Buzz Lightyear, but this just was a huge swing and a miss for me. It takes the interesting Buzz from the Toy Story movies and just strips him of everything interesting with his character, making him this dull space man, barely even a space ranger, who is honestly a little bit unlikable. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all that he was every kid's hero when that's the movie that came out. The twist at the end is also just incredibly stupid and was so 100% convoluted and complicated that I guarantee it just soared over most kids' heads in the theater. Like I said, it's just an absolute swing and a miss for Pixar. 27 is A Bug's Life, and it's a pretty similar story to The Good Dinosaur, a decent story that, in this case, I feel like is actually really well written, but it is kind of forgettable, and it doesn't help that this movie was sandwiched between the first two Toy Story films and then overshadowed by the greatest run in cinematic history, to the point that it's probably the least talked about movie in Pixar's entire catalog. I think it's fine, it just seems to have fell through the cracks over the years. At 26, I've got Elemental, a movie that I feel like came and went without a second thought, even though I think it actually toyed with some interesting ideas and clever world building, but never quite explored them to the extent I would have enjoyed. It's really just an ordinary movie that doesn't move the needle too far in either direction. It plays everything pretty safe, and as a result, it automatically gets placed lower than the movies that I feel like really went all in with their crazy ideas. Next up is Finding Dory, and I think we're to the point now where I do really enjoy all of the remaining films on this list, and I think I'm actually higher on Dory than most people. It's a strong concept for a sequel, and she's a character with enough depth to carry her own movie without it feeling too forced. I also really enjoyed the aquarium setting of this movie. I think Pixar is really good at creating enjoyable settings for their stories, and this one was no different. But that being said, I still really don't like how off the rails the movie gets towards the end. In a very short amount of time, we go from our central conflict being a fish and an octopus navigating a fish tank to escape the poking fingers of little kids, to those exact same characters driving a truck off of a cliff and soaring over dozens of cops with rifles in their arms to the tune of Louis Armstrong. It's really just a jarring escalation that hurts the movie more than it helps it. At 24, I have Elio from last year. It's a movie that surprised me with its charm. I was kind of expecting another forgettable outing from Pixar like a lot of their originals have been in recent years, and even though it wasn't the most memorable thing in the world, I had fun with it. I thought it was a cool concept that was executed well. I enjoyed it a lot. It's just not quite as good as a lot of the other stuff Pixar's done, including number 23, which is Onward. I've always imagined this movie as the thing that started COVID. This was the last movie I saw in the theaters before quarantine started. I don't even know why I'm talking about that, but as for the movie itself, it's a really heartfelt and original story with a stellar voice cast. It's one of those movies that has creative enough world building to where I actually wouldn't mind some sort of sequel in the future, but I understand that's probably never going to happen. 22 is Cars 3. As you'll see later on in this list, I am a big Cars guy, and I think this one is almost exactly what I wanted as a finisher to this franchise. The whole athlete approaching retirement story is not at all an original one. It's been done a lot of times, but I actually think Cars 3 makes it fresh. I think Jackson Storm is one of the better Pixar antagonists, and I really like the three-way rivalry between him, Lightning, and Cruz. Overall, it's a movie that I've come to enjoy a lot more over the years, even if it is a bit slow in the middle section. Next, I've got Incredibles 2. When you bring back Brad Bird and the entire original cast of the first movie, I feel like the movie's floor is gonna be pretty high, but unfortunately, that seems to just be where Incredibles 2 operates. It's still a good movie, like I said, it's a high floor, but I can't help but think it could have been so much better. The villain is just straight up obvious and pretty poorly written, and I actually think the movie's 14-year gap from the first one hurt it. It's like it couldn't decide if it wanted to be edgy for the crowd that saw the first movie as a kid and is now grown up, or if it wanted to be more lighthearted like the first movie for a new generation, and I think it got caught in a really weird gray area that just feels off. I'll repeat again, high floor, really good movie, but could have been so much better. 20 is Inside Out. This is Pixar flexing its creativity muscles in a way that really no other studio can or does. This was a really pivotal moment for the studio. They were coming off their first run of poorly received films, and they follow it up with an absolute home run of a movie. The themes are very relatable for the human side, and then for the emotions, I think the movie did a really good job of actually taking these characters that are inherently supposed to be one-dimensional, defined by one singular emotion, and still managing to give them enough depth to stay interesting for an entire movie and a sequel. Just an absolute masterclass in Pixar originality. Next, I have Up, and I think this is where the hot takes are starting to slip through. Look, Up is a great film. I actually rewatched it more recently than most of the movies on this list, but I still can't help but feel like it put itself in a tough position by shooting all of its emotional bullets in the first 15 minutes of the movie. I still enjoy the rest of it, it's not even close to bad by any means, but the overarching story they chose to go with just doesn't capture me in the same way that the opening did. And it's tough on the viewer for a movie to grab hold of you so tightly at the beginning, and then, even if slightly, just loosen its grip over time. It makes for an odd experience. Great movie, just a little bit inconsistent. 18 is another classic that most people probably have a lot higher than me. It's Finding Nemo. This was never my childhood staple or anything. I don't have any nostalgia for it. It's simply a movie that I look at and say, that's a really great movie. I love the animation, it's stunning to look at. I think the film is actually pretty funny, and the father searching for his son who's in danger story sets up for a lot more interesting dynamic and story than the typical parent-child relationship that movies like Turning Red and Brave tried to tackle. Really solid movie overall, it just never climbed to that top tier for me. Next up, I have what might be the hottest take on this list. I'm not sure, but it's Cars 2. I guess I just have to preface it with, do I understand it's a really weird idea for a sequel? Obviously, yes. Is it objectively the wrong choice for a sequel to a racing movie? Obviously, yes. But is it so unbelievably entertaining that I can forgive all of that? Obviously, yes. I feel like every time I watch this, I have even more fun with it than the last time. It's like racing and espionage don't seem like they would mix, and they honestly don't mix as well as other things might have, but I just enjoy it so much. And if I'm looking through the Pixar catalog for something to just have fun with that isn't too big of a mental commitment, this is what I'll probably go with. At 16, I've got the other new Pixar movie from this year, Hoppers. This is a concept that could have felt redundant just because it literally is Avatar. It actually references Avatar in the movie, but I still think it did more than enough to set itself apart. There was a particular sequence in this movie, about 2/3 of the way through, involving a flying shark that left me just sitting in the theater staring at the screen and thinking to myself, what the heck am I watching? That's in a good way, of course, but it's the first time I've had that sort of experience with a Pixar movie in a long time, so I really enjoyed it. It's one of the best movies of this year so far, and a really great Pixar movie overall. 15, I have WALL-E. I'm somebody that actually prefers the first half of this movie to the second, but the fact that they're so different and yet still manage to click together and feel like one cohesive puzzle is so impressive. This was the height of Pixar's run in the 2000s, and you can feel it. The pacing works, the characters are great, the romance is great, even with just about 0 words spoken between the two leads. It's really just an impressive feat in visual storytelling, and it's a film I think is in the very top tier of Pixar when it comes to its animations and visuals. Great movie overall. And now at 14, we finally have the newest Pixar movie, Toy Story 5. This is a film that does a whole lot of amazing stuff. Focusing on Jessie was a great idea, and it opens the door to a lot of emotional weight that didn't feel possible with how much time we spent with both Woody and Buzz over the years. Lilypad is a great villain, and the other new side characters work really well, especially Conan O'Brien's Smarty Pants. That being said, I think the only thing holding this back from the top 10 range is how messy the narrative feels, especially in the first hour. There are multiple moments that left me scratching my head, and it's not necessarily a constant issue, but it's just present enough to make me feel the need to address it. I also do feel like Woody's inclusion in the movie was a bit forced and unnecessary, and he just didn't have enough to do. But despite that, I think this is obviously still a great movie and a worthy addition to Pixar's greatest franchise. If you want to hear my in-depth thoughts on the movie, I have my review linked in the description down below. Next up is another recent sequel, Inside Out 2. This is a movie that took everything I loved about the first film and just cranked it up to a new level. I'm a sports guy, so I loved the hockey sequences. I think it took Riley in a phenomenal new direction that felt very natural with her aging into her teenage years. The emotions that came along with that, specifically Maya Hawke's anxiety, were great additions, and they added a new layer to the story that made it feel fresh and original. One other thing is that this may be the funniest movie on this list. I haven't laughed nearly as hard at a Pixar movie as I did whenever Pouchy came on screen, and everything that ensued afterwards. Overall, the movie is phenomenal, and the emotional ending hit me like a punch to the gut. At 12, I've got Monsters University. I understand I'm a lot higher on this movie than most other people, but I've just always loved it for some reason. Even though I feel like Monsters Inc. deserved probably a true sequel, I still believe that a prequel was a great idea, and that this was a phenomenal execution of that concept. It's so interesting to see Mike and Sully go through the mental journeys they had to take to get to the point that they're at in the first movie, and it's a concept that I can safely say I never would have considered a possibility myself, but man, am I glad it exists. It's just such a fun movie that's always been a personal favorite of mine. At 11, I have what honestly may be my most unpopular opinion on this whole list, and that's Luca. In my opinion, Luca is easily the most underrated movie that Pixar's made, and I think it's just a matter of simplicity for me. This is a small, contained story with a dash of that Pixar innovation to make it stand out. The setting on the Italian Riviera is one of my favorites in any movie, and the way it's captured makes for some of the most beautiful frames in all of animation. I genuinely think this movie just kinda got lumped in with the 2020's Pixar mediocrity because it got dumped on Disney Plus and nobody really took it seriously, but I still maintain that this is one of the best movies they've made in years, and it's certainly one of my favorites. But moving now into the top 10, we have Coco, the movie that I rewatched most recently on this list. For years, when I thought of Coco, I just envisioned that gut-wrenching ending scene and then some of the beautiful shots in the land of the dead, but to me, it never felt like anything much more than that. But now, after a rewatch, this is one of Pixar's smartest and most tightly written scripts. Miguel is truly one of Pixar's best and most well-written protagonists, Ernesto de la Cruz is probably Pixar's best twist villain of all time, and every other character really just works for me. And of course, not to mention, that ending is the only moment in Pixar history that has ever made me physically shed a tear. It's so charged with just raw emotion, and it really resembles the Pixar moments that were happening consistently in the 2000s. Just a phenomenal movie overall. At 9, I've got Toy Story 2. Not to spoil this list going further, but we've reached a chunk of Toy Story films that I just have no clue how to rank. It could change from day to day, from minute to minute if I'm being honest with you, but right now I've got Toy Story 2 right here. It's such a smart and well-written sequel that takes every character and expands on everything about them set up in the first movie. Jesse, Bullseye, and the Prospector are all amazing new characters that have obviously affected the franchise in huge ways, and I just loved watching all of them interact with Woody in those Woody's Roundup scenes. Those are probably my favorite parts of the movie. It's an insanely fast-paced film that never lets up with its comedy and its action, and it's a sequel that I absolutely love. But just ahead of it is Toy Story 4. Look, I know that it was probably unnecessary and that it slightly takes away from the beautiful ending before it, but when I just look at this movie in front of me, I can't help but enjoy it thoroughly. The carnival setting is great. Bringing back Bo Peep worked really well for me and gave an opportunity to give a sufficient end to Woody's character. The third act is one of my favorites. It's just non-stop action topped off with an emotional moment that I've always felt worked just about as well as Toy Story 3's ending. Obviously, it doesn't totally mean the same after Toy Story 5, but that doesn't affect the emotions I feel when I watch it. It's also probably the best looking Pixar movie, both in terms of photorealism and artistically. I think it's a delight to watch, and I don't share the opinion that it ruined anything. It only added on to it. But just ahead of Toy Story 4, I have the original Toy Story, the film that started it all for Pixar. This is a movie that sets up a simple conflict between two characters, lets it brew and brew and brew until it boils over, and that simplicity is so refreshing. It's also an extremely tight script and brilliantly written film. It's only about 81 minutes, and that time still feels like it flies by every time I watch it. The animation still holds up for me, aside from the humans. They hadn't quite figured that one out yet, but everything else looks great. This movie gave us what may be the two greatest characters in animation history, but it also delivered a heartfelt story that laid the foundation for what Pixar was going to be moving forward. At number 6, I've got Soul. This is a movie that has always felt interesting to me. Obviously, based on where I have it ranked, I think it's an unbelievable movie that tells a story that's so relevant and useful for its viewers, but on the other hand, it doesn't feel like a kid's movie at all. Sure, it's Disney and it's PG, but this feels directly addressed towards adults. These themes of living your life to the fullest and taking in the moments you have before it's too late are a tad morbid, but most of all, they're extremely mature, and so I'm very interested to know what little kids watching this movie had to say. All that aside though, the animation here is stunning. I desperately wish I could have gotten to see this in the theaters. The Pixar moment here with Joe playing the piano and just reflecting on life is so raw, and like I said before, relatable, and it always tends to get me in the feels when I watch it. Soul is just an overall amazing movie, and I'm so happy it exists, even though I'm surprised Pixar made something so existential like this. Moving into the top 5, we have Monsters, Inc. I look at this movie as the prime of Pixar, that early 2000s era where they were just delivering smash hit after smash hit, and this is the primary example of that. I do really think that this is Pixar's most creative idea for a movie to date. I don't know how on earth you come up with something like this, but it's executed flawlessly. Every character here has motive, depth, and their own amazing moments, and all of those moments build up to a collective that I believe is the studio's most well-written screenplay. As much as I hate the idea of legacy sequels, I am absolutely pumped to see what they manage to cook up for a Monsters Inc. 2, and I will be very upset if it isn't great. At number 4, I have another film from this early Pixar era, and that's The Incredibles. This is a movie that isn't just one of the best kids superhero films ever, it's just one of the greatest superhero films ever, straight up. It works as both an entertaining thrill ride and a mature family drama. Brad Bird brings the absolute sauce in the director's chair, and Syndrome is easily a top 5 Pixar villain. It's almost a movie that feels like it was developed as a movie meant for adults before being changed to gear towards kids, just with how big of a role things like insurance companies and torture play. But I think that just leans into what Pixar does best, which is deliver movies that both parents and their children can enjoy at the same time. The Incredibles still stands the test of time and works as a phenomenal film. Coming in at number 3 for me is Cars. I think when it comes to Pixar specifically, everyone making a list is allowed one single nostalgia pick to place wherever you want that cannot be argued. For me, my entire childhood was Cars, and yes, that definitely affects where I have it ranked, but I still think it's a great movie in its own right. The first 10 minutes are my personal favorite in any Pixar movie, and then the rest is just a very heartfelt and really well-written story that I've always found extremely enjoyable. I love the growth that Lightning McQueen undergoes in this movie. I always thought his popularity stemmed from more than just the fact that he was a race car, and more so that he was just a really well-written character. As for the movie's concept, I understand as well as anyone that it probably leaves you walking away with more questions than answers, but I don't care. I love the movie even more for that reason. But for me, Pixar's second greatest film is Ratatouille. Pound for pound, if any Pixar movie was ever going to compete for like real Oscars, not just the animation category, this is the movie that would do it. And it's so weird that this works so well. It's genuinely like something you'd find in a Mad Libs game. One day, a name an animal rat decides to become, name a job, chef in, name a city, Paris, France. But that originality is what defines Pixar, and I think this movie is the shining example of that. Its dedication to realism in the kitchen cannot be ignored. I know Anthony Bourdain called this the most realistic cooking film he's ever seen, and I just love how that environment interacts with the story. The characters here are absolutely top-notch. Alfredo and Remy are a great duo, and I particularly love Anton Ego as an antagonist. He brings an undeniably intimidating presence that undergoes a beautiful change as the movie goes on. In terms of looking at a character from beginning to end within a single story, he has probably my favorite transformation in all of Pixar. I just absolutely love this movie and how it looks. I can't get enough of it, and it's so close to being my favorite. But coming in at number 1, without much of a second thought, it's Toy Story 3. From beginning to end, this feels like Pixar flexing its muscles and just showing off how great it is at what it does. The way that it completes existing character arcs all while setting up compelling new ones in the process is just brilliant writing. I think Sunnyside as a setting works as it goes from charming to sinister in a hurry, and then the prison break sequence in the third act is just so much better than it has any right to be. Lotso is my favorite Pixar villain. He's so likable and unlikable at the same time, and he's written so well. As for the first part of the ending, it's gut-wrenching that Pixar had the gall to show what it looks like when Woody and Buzz and the gang have to visibly accept impending death. And it works. That's still unbelievable to me. And then for the second part of the ending, I mean, man, how can you not get emotional at this? It is the definition of a perfect ending. And even though I love the movies, I like to act like those sequels don't exist when I'm watching this. It's a film that I'm not afraid to say is pure perfection from beginning to end, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the best movie that Pixar has ever made. Alright, there's my list. If you disagree with certain things, which I am very sure you do, let me know down below, but don't do it without including your own ranking as well. If you agree with anything I said, also leave that down below. I don't want the comment section getting too toxic with just slamming my takes, but if you made it this far in the video, I truly appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe for more videos just like this. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless.